The sun was setting over a small village, casting a warm orange glow over the thatched roofs and the green forest that surrounded it. In a cozy little cottage, Little Red Riding Hood was busy helping her mother prepare a basket of fresh food for her grandmother who lived on the other side of the forest. Her mother was packing a warm loaf of bread, some juicy apples, and a small jar of sweet honey into the basket. Little Red Riding Hood's eyes sparkled as she watched her mother work, her bright red cloak draped over the back of a chair, waiting for her to put it on. "Remember, dear, to stay on the path and don't talk to strangers," her mother said, as she handed Little Red Riding Hood the basket. "Grandmother is waiting for you, and she's not feeling well, so be sure to give her a big hug from me." Little Red Riding Hood nodded, her curly brown hair bouncing with the movement. She put on her red cloak, and it wrapped warmly around her shoulders, the hood falling softly over her head. As she walked out of the cottage, the warm sunlight caught her cloak, and it shone like a bright flower in the fading light. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers and the gentle hum of bees as they flew from flower to flower. Little Red Riding Hood took a deep breath, feeling the freshness of the air fill her lungs, and set off towards the forest. The trees towered above her, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze, like a gentle whisper in her ear. "Goodbye, dear, be careful," her mother called out, as Little Red Riding Hood walked away from the cottage. She turned and waved, her red cloak fluttering behind her, and then disappeared into the trees. The forest was quiet, the only sound being the soft crunch of leaves and twigs beneath Little Red Riding Hood's feet. She walked for a while, the trees growing taller and the path growing narrower, until she came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous oak tree, its branches stretching up towards the sky like giant arms. As she walked through the clearing, Little Red Riding Hood noticed the creatures of the forest watching her. A squirrel perched on a branch, its bright eyes shining with curiosity, and a rabbit hopped across her path, its soft fur fluffing up as it stopped to look at her. She smiled and said hello, and the creatures seemed to smile back, their faces twitching with friendly interest. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the warm sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The forest was a magical place, full of wonders and secrets, and Little Red Riding Hood felt happy and safe as she walked through it. She had visited her grandmother many times before, and she knew the way well. As she walked, the trees seemed to grow closer together, and the path grew narrower, until she came to a small stream that ran through the forest. The water was crystal clear, and it sparkled like diamonds in the fading light. Little Red Riding Hood stopped to listen to the gentle gurgling of the stream, and she felt her heart fill with peace and contentment. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Little Red Riding Hood continued on her way, the forest growing quieter and more still. The trees seemed to be sleeping, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, and the creatures of the forest were settling in for the night. Little Red Riding Hood felt her eyelids growing heavy, and she yawned, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She knew she was getting close to her grandmother's house, and she quickened her pace, her heart filled with love and anticipation. The forest was growing darker, the shadows deepening, and the stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky. Little Red Riding Hood felt a sense of wonder and magic in the air, and she knew that she was on a special journey, one that would bring her joy and happiness. As the darkness deepened, the trees seemed to grow taller and the path grew more winding. Little Red Riding Hood walked carefully, her eyes adjusting to the fading light. She heard the sound of crickets chirping and the distant hooting of an owl, and she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The forest was quiet and still, and she felt like she was the only person in the world. Suddenly, a firefly flitted across her path, its light flashing like a tiny lantern. Little Red Riding Hood smiled and watched as it danced around her head, its light flickering like a tiny star. As she walked, the trees began to thin out, and Little Red Riding Hood caught sight of a clearing up ahead. In the center of the clearing stood her grandmother's house, its windows glowing like warm embers in the darkness. Little Red Riding Hood's heart filled with joy, and she quickened her pace, her feet carrying her towards the house like they had a mind of their own. She could see the smoke rising from the chimney, and she knew that her grandmother was waiting for her, a warm meal and a cozy fire ready to greet her. As she approached the house, she heard the sound of her grandmother's voice, calling out to her in a warm and welcoming tone. "Little Red Riding Hood, is that you?" she asked, her voice like a soft breeze on a summer day. Little Red Riding Hood smiled and called out, "Yes, grandmother, it's me." She walked up to the door and knocked, and her grandmother opened it, a warm smile on her face. "Come in, dear, come in," she said, opening the door wide. Little Red Riding Hood stepped inside, feeling the warmth and comfort of the house envelop her like a soft blanket. The room was cozy and inviting, the fire crackling and spitting in the fireplace. Her grandmother took her cloak and hung it on a hook, and Little Red Riding Hood sat down in a chair, feeling the softness of the cushion beneath her. Her grandmother brought her a cup of hot tea, and Little Red Riding Hood sipped it gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through her body. As they sat together, Little Red Riding Hood told her grandmother all about her journey, about the creatures she had seen and the things she had noticed. Her grandmother listened with a warm and interested smile, asking questions and making comments. The room was filled with the scent of baking, and Little Red Riding Hood's stomach growled with hunger. Her grandmother laughed and said, "I have some fresh bread and some soup ready for you, dear. You must be starving after your journey." Little Red Riding Hood nodded, and her grandmother brought her a bowl of steaming hot soup and a slice of fresh bread. She ate gratefully, feeling the warmth and comfort of the food fill her belly. As they ate, the fire crackled and spat, casting shadows on the walls. Little Red Riding Hood felt her eyelids growing heavy, and she yawned, feeling the warmth of the fire on her face. Her grandmother smiled and said, "You must be tired, dear. Why don't you go to bed, and we can talk more in the morning? Little Red Riding Hood nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She stood up, and her grandmother led her to a cozy little bedroom, the bed soft and inviting. Little Red Riding Hood climbed into bed, feeling the softness of the blankets and the warmth of the room. Her grandmother tucked her in, and Little Red Riding Hood felt her eyes growing heavy, her body relaxing into the softness of the bed. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard her grandmother's voice, whispering softly in her ear. "Sleep tight, dear, sleep tight." The room was quiet, the only sound the soft whisper of her grandmother's voice. Little Red Riding Hood felt her eyelids growing heavier, her body sinking deeper into the softness of the bed. Her grandmother's hand stroked her hair, gentle and soothing. "Everything is all right, dear," she whispered. "You are safe and warm, and I am here with you." Little Red Riding Hood's breathing slowed, and she felt her body relax, letting go of all tension and worry. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt the warmth of the room, the softness of the blankets, and the comfort of her grandmother's presence. The fire in the other room crackled and spat, but the sound was muffled, distant. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother sat beside her, watching her sleep, a warm smile on her face. She stroked her hair, gently, softly, and whispered softly in her ear. "Sleep tight, dear, sleep tight. May your dreams be sweet and your rest be refreshing." The room grew quieter, the only sound the soft whisper of her grandmother's voice. The fire burned low, casting a warm glow over the room. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother sat beside her, watching her sleep, her eyes filled with love and warmth. She sat there for a long time, watching her granddaughter sleep, feeling grateful for the warmth and comfort of the moment. As the night wore on, the house grew quieter, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock in the other room. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother finally stood up, gently, so as not to disturb her granddaughter. She walked over to the window, and looked out into the night, the moon shining brightly in the sky. The world outside was quiet, still, the only sound the distant hooting of an owl. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their branches creaking softly. The room was warm, the air filled with the scent of baking and the warmth of the fire. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother walked back over to the bed, and looked down at her granddaughter, sleeping peacefully. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace and contentment wash over her. She leaned down, and kissed her granddaughter's forehead, gently, softly. "Sleep tight, dear," she whispered. "May your rest be refreshing, and your heart be filled with joy." As she stood there, the room grew quieter, the silence deepening. The clock ticked softly in the other room, the only sound in the stillness. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother stood there, watching her granddaughter sleep, feeling the warmth and comfort of the moment. The world outside was quiet, still, the moon shining brightly in the sky. The house was warm, the air filled with the scent of baking, and the warmth of the fire. The night wore on, the silence deepening, the stillness growing. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother finally sat down in a chair beside the bed, watching her granddaughter sleep. She sat there, quietly, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock. The room was warm, the air filled with the scent of baking, and the warmth of the fire. The world outside was quiet, still, the moon shining brightly in the sky. And in the midst of it all, Little Red Riding Hood slept peacefully, her heart filled with joy, her body warm and comfortable. The silence deepened, the stillness grew, and everything became quiet and still.